Support for Consider This is provided by the University of Nebraska at Omaha College of Communication, Fine Arts, and Media.
Consider This, a program of issues and information behind today's news.
I was homeless and you took me in, not only for a house made of bricks, but I was homeless, unwanted, unloved, a throwaway of society. But today we have right here in our country, we see the poor people, we see the young people with that disease, unwanted, unloved, a throwaway of society. Are we there to be that love, that kindness, that thoughtfulness to them, and share with them the terrible pain, the terrible feeling of terrible loneliness, being a throwaway, have no one to be somebody to somebody. This is the nativity of Jesus.
You're watching an excerpt from Mother Teresa's last speech, a Catholic nun and missionary. She was best known for her work among the poorest of the poor. One of the greatest humanitarians of the 20th century. She passed away on September 5th, 1997. Hi everyone, I'm Kathy Wyatt. Welcome to this week's edition of Consider This. Our topic, crossing bridges. Joining us to talk more about it is Father Ken Vavrina, a Catholic priest, activist, and now author. Right? Welcome to the program.
Now
Thank
author,
you.
Yes.
Thank you for being here. Father, I want to begin by asking, what were you thinking about when you were watching that opening?
First of all, I want to thank you, Kathy, and UNO for inviting me to have this interview. This is an honor. So thank you so much.
You're welcome. You're welcome. I do want to go to that opening clip. I know Mother Teresa means so much to you. What were you thinking about as you were watching that?
Well, you know, I worked with Mother Teresa for 6 years in Calcutta and with her sisters in Calcutta, Bangladesh, Nepal, and in many other countries as well. The first time I met Mother was at Boys Town 100 years ago, and then I decided I wanted to work overseas. And I wanted to work with lepers, and it just so happened I went to Rome. Mother was in Rome. She threw up her hands and says, "Oh, thank God you're here, Father. We need a priest in Yemen. Would you be willing to work with my sisters in Yemen?" So that's what I did. I went to Yemen and I worked with lepers for 6 years. I loved it immensely. I ended up getting put in jail and kicked out of the country. If I had not been put in jail, I probably would still be working with lepers. Best job I ever had.
Oh my goodness. Fondest memory, Father, with Mother Teresa.
So many. And so many with Mother Teresa in various countries, and 6 years in Calcutta.
My goodness sakes. All right. So I want to go, before we go forward and talk more about you becoming an author now, let's go back in time a little bit, well, a little ways back to Clarkson, Nebraska. Tell us about
80 years back.
I know. Tell us a little bit about your childhood.
Well, I grew up in a small town. My father died when I was 5. We were very poor. My mom was a school teacher. I have an older brother. And we lived very, very modest lives and great lives. Growing up in a small town is fantastic. You've got friends and you don't have gangs, and it was just wonderful. And I played baseball and basketball and everything. It was just wonderful growing up in a small town.
When did you know, Father, that you wanted to be a priest?
Well, that's a long story. I dated a girl all through high school. We were very, very much in love. I was thinking about going to law school, and we were talking about getting married. And then all of a sudden it happened just like that. I was in a pickup driving from Clarkson to Howells, and I can tell you exactly where it was on the road that the thought entered my mind for the first time that maybe I should go to the seminary. And I tried to put it away. Dorothy and I were very much in love, and but I couldn't put it away. No matter how hard I tried, I couldn't get it out of my head until I finally said it. You know, it was so hard on Dorothy. And it was, and I said to myself, you know, unless I give it a try, I'll never know. Mm-hmm. So I went to the seminary, and then it went on and on and on, and here I am. I've been a priest for 53 years.
Talk about what that was like to cross that bridge from being, right, Ken Vavrina to Father Ken Vavrina.
Oh my, that's huge, because I never was a religious person. I got myself into a lot of trouble in the small town of Clarkson when they found out that I was going to the seminary. Everybody said, "You're kidding." They couldn't believe that I was going to the seminary. Actually, neither could I. But it just went on, and here I am.
Early days of the priesthood, Father, what do you remember most about those early days?
Oh my, it's going back 53 years. I was working on the Indian reservation in Winnebago and Macy. I loved it. I always loved working with the poor and the disadvantaged. I never thought about really myself as a priest. I thought about myself as a person working with other people and trying to empower them.
Yeah, working with them not only here at home in Nebraska, but then you started traveling around the world. Your mission went global. Well,
it did. I always thought about working overseas, and I met Mother Teresa in Boys Town many, many years ago. And then there were a lot of priests. This was back in 1960, in 77. Mm-hmm. There were a lot of priests at that time. I met with Archbishop Dan Sheehan, and I said, Archbishop Sheehan, I'm thinking about taking a leave of absence. Would you permit me to be out of the country for 1 year? And I went to Rome, and things just clicked. Mother Teresa was in Rome. She met me. She threw her hands in the air and says, "Oh, Father, thank God you're here. We need a priest in Yemen. Would you be willing to work in Yemen?" I said, "Sure." I wasn't sure where Yemen was. I really wasn't sure. She went with me to the Yemeni embassy. That night I was on a plane to Yemen, where I worked with lepers for 6 years, and I'd probably still be working with lepers today if it had not been that I was put in jail and kicked out of the country for doing nothing.
It sounds like the absolute epitome of someone who walks by faith, right? Didn't know you wanted to be a priest, wasn't sure where you were going to be going around the world, right?
By faith, being loose, by following the Spirit, by not being afraid, by not being afraid to do different things, and not being afraid to cross bridges.
Yeah. Where else did you travel around the world, Father?
What other countries?
Yeah, where else did you go?
Oh, so many. Africa, Bangladesh, Liberia, Kathmandu, India, Bangladesh, Nepal, and many other countries in Central America. I can't even, it would take too long.
And how long ago was it that people started asking if you would put all of this down on paper in a book? What's your first recollection of somebody saying?
A long time ago, people, when I came back from overseas 20 years ago now, I've been working in the Archdiocese in parishes for 20 years. People were saying, "Oh, Father, you should write a book," and I didn't want to write a book. I didn't want to write a book because I did not want to focus attention on myself.
Okay.
Hold on just a minute. I did not want to focus attention on myself, so I kept on saying no and no until finally I said, "I'm going to do it." And Father Leo Biga was my friend, and he nudged me and helped me, and after about 1 year, the book is finished.
Yeah, and when you say finally you decided to do it, we're just talking recently here at age, I hope you don't mind my saying, 80, right? You decided that...
Don't say that too many times.
That you would
They
go
might
ahead.
believe you.
Well, you'll set me straight, I'm sure. But you decided then, at age 80, to go ahead and write this book.
Age 79.
Proving so many things, Father, right? That it's never too late
to
do something.
And I'm so glad that I did it, you know. And let me tell you what was interesting about writing a book. I'm sitting at my computer and say I'm writing about Yemen, and I'm there. as I'm writing about these various countries and where I was, I'm there. You know, I have a good memory, thank God, and it was as though I had just been there.
Well, we've referenced the title of the book a little bit here, but tell us more about, of all the things you could have called a book with your life story, why Crossing Bridges?
I mentioned this in the book at the very beginning. When I was about 10 years of age, I have a lot of family that lives in Los Angeles, and we went to LA during Christmas vacation, and we were driving on the southern coast near El Paso. And I remember I was maybe 9 years of age. My mom pointed out the window. She said, across that bridge is Mexico. And I looked at that bridge and I said to myself, one of these days I'm going to cross that bridge. I never crossed that one, but I've crossed a lot of bridges in my life, and I've been blessed.
Crossing bridges, including going from not being an author to being an author. Father, what does it take to write a book?
It takes time. But it was easy for me because it's just a story of 23 years of my life. I just put it down.
Had you taken notes along the way on these journeys?
When I was with Catholic, well, the first 6 years I worked with lepers, but I have a good memory. But then when I would, the last 12 years with Catholic Relief Services, I had to write situation reports, and I kept copies of them, but I never referred to the situation reports. I just have a good memory. I'm grateful.
So when it came to the book and you were sitting down with Leo was just maybe asking you some questions.
Exactly.
How did that all transpire then?
I just told a story.
And he's just jotting it all down? And
he's jotting it down, and eventually here it is, the book.
And yes, well, we put the cover up, but I do have my own autographed copy. Thank you very much for that. Yes. All right, so we went through and looked at some of the excerpts. What we'd like to do now is put up some photographs. And I want you to take some time, Father, and tell us what it is that we're seeing in terms of these photographs.
Okay. Oh, that's when I was a young kid and I had hair. Look at that. Look at all that hair. This was when I was working with lepers in Yemen. This is in Yemen. I know exactly where this was taken. This is in the leper village. And as I mentioned, if I had not been put in jail and kicked out of the country, I'd still be working with lepers. The best job I ever had.
Okay.
Well, that's working with lepers. You do a lot of this. You have to scrape skin. You have to cut skin off. Otherwise, they get infection and then they would get gangrene. And so I spent a lot of my time doing just what you see there, cutting skin so that the people are going to be able to heal.
I read in the excerpt that while this person is not wearing gloves, that you did wear gloves.
I wore gloves all the time because you never know who is negative and who is positive.
And we elected to put this photo up just so that folks could truly understand, Father, where you've been and the folks with whom you've worked, right?
If you take a look at the fingers of that lady who is working,
right.
She's a dear friend of mine. Her name is Jamila. I think you'll see her picture later on. She's a negative leper. We worked together with lepers. I've kissed her 1,000 times. I love her with all my heart. And then when I was asked, I was forced to leave Yemen by the government. Then she cried and I cried.
Well, and I think her picture is,
isn't
this her
Jamila.
now?
Sweet Jamila. Great lady. She died shortly after I went to jail.
Wow, okay.
There's a saint.
And what about this photo, Father?
Well, this is on the tracks. One of the segments of the book, and I think this is going to be made into a movie one day. We got a group of people, and we went from the capital Monrovia to Yaquepa, and on the tracks. And these tracks, you can see they're all rusted out. And the reason we were on these tracks is right in the middle. Let me start back away. Charles Taylor was a big warlord of Yemen at this time. And there was a group right in the middle of the country of about 300,000 people who were starving. We could not get to them from Monrovia. I went to Banga, where Charles Taylor was. He couldn't even get to them. So, but these tracks ran right through the center of where those 300,000 people were. I said, President, he loved to be called President. I said, President Taylor, would you give me permission to be able to get an engineer, find the engine, and go up these tracks? He says, go ahead. We didn't know if the bridges were mined. We didn't know if they would hold us. We just went and we made it.
Okay.
And we got right into the area where the 300,000 people were. We offloaded supplies. I remember one time we stopped about 11 times. We were offloading food and medicines. And we stopped at this one place, and we had CRS on the front of the engine and on the sides, because we wanted the people to know that it was Catholic Relief Services and not one of the warlords who was providing these services. And people started to shout, CRS, CRS, and I got tears in my eyes.
Well, let's go back to these photos, Father.
Okay.
What are we looking at here?
Well, that's Cuba. This was at the very end of my working overseas. I think we brought in either $7 or $11 million worth of medicines to Cuba, and we're offloading the medicines now. There were some congressmen in the USA who were saying, Fidel Castro is going to sell the medicines and put the money in his pocket. So I accompanied the medicines to the various hospitals, at least to assure that they got to the hospitals.
Okay. And this photo?
This is Cuba. The man in the center is Cardinal Jaime Ortega. He's the Cardinal of Cuba. Ken Hackett is here on this side. Ken Hackett is the other man facing. At the time, he was the executive director of Catholic Relief Services. This is part of that trip of taking medicines to Cuba.
Okay.
This is New York. I had a short radio and a television program in New York City for a while, and this is where we're on the air. And this is in New York City.
Okay.
This is after I returned from Cuba, and they were very interested in Cuba. A lot of Cubans in New York.
Okay. And so we have talked about the priesthood. We've talked about the book now, and you've referenced it a few times. So Ken Vavrina, the activist, you've talked about jail a few times in this interview. So let's go to that now, and you share with us what you would like to.
I've always been an activist. I've always gotten out of the office. You have to get out of the office, I say to the pastors. Get out of your offices. Get to the people. Get on the street. That's where it's at. This is what Pope Francis is talking about as well. But I've had a wonderful life being with the people, learning to love them, learning to understand them, and then in some way maybe even being able to help them somewhat.
So what happened, Father, that you were put in jail? And
well, I don't know for sure. I was working with lepers in Yemen for 5.5 years, never broke any law. We never broke any of the laws. One day I was in the leper village, and somebody from security came in and says that they wanted me to present my documents. I was not concerned. All my documents were in order. That evening I submitted my documents to security, and they looked at them, and they looked at them, and they looked at them, and for no reason at all, they asked me to leave the country. And I don't know why. I was told by the sisters that maybe the reason why I was asked to leave the country is that I enjoyed working with lepers, and the Yemenis couldn't understand how an American who can work with lepers and enjoy it, they thought that I probably was with the CIA.
so to this day, what do you think about all of that?
It was fine. Everything is cool.
So it all shook out okay for
It all, you know, everything, yeah, sure, things move from things to this and this and this, and it's okay. Life is good. Just accept it.
Lessons learned from that? Any?
Just be grateful what you're doing and look forward to the future. And don't be afraid. Don't be afraid to cross bridges.
Okay, so when you came back, and when did you come back then to Omaha from your global missionary work?
I went overseas in 77, and I came back in 77, 87, 97, around 2000.
Okay, and so you come back to Omaha. I mean, it seems so simple for me to say, another bridge that you crossed. You came back from there into Omaha. Talk about...
I was 60 years at malaria. I had West Africa. The last country in which I worked was Liberia. And West African countries have a very strong strain of malaria. And I had malaria for 20 years, you know, but not nearly like in Liberia, Africa. I was having malaria attacks about once a month, and I had to just get out of there and come back to the States. Otherwise, I probably would have died of malaria.
What is that like, Father, to have that?
You vomit, you have diarrhea, you have a fever, you get sick.
So people would ask then, why stay, Father? Why did you put yourself through all of that then?
You don't even think about it. You know, you see the people and you have your friends and you're in love with what you're doing. You don't want to change. You know, malaria is malaria, no big deal. You know, I've never let anything bother me, and I figured I'd be okay, and here I am, I'm okay.
Father, you crossed the bridge from all of that back to Omaha. Talk about that transition. You know, you've explained a few transitions. Yeah, what's that like to come back from that?
That was the toughest bridge.
Yeah.
Coming back to the USA permanently was the toughest bridge. And the reason why is the people in the USA don't know anything about anything. They don't understand poverty. They don't understand what's happening in other countries. And here I was trying to explain to them, and it was like talking to that wall.
So, Father, help us out here then in terms of, it's very, very hard if you've not experienced some of the things that you have obviously experienced to really grasp what that's about. So if you were able to, which you are now, to explain to viewers, how do you take that and put that into our everyday lives, right?
Well, working overseas for me with the poorest of the poor was pure joy. Mm-hmm. Pure joy. These people are the saints. You saw that lady on one of the clips. I don't know if you'll see her again. She's very slender. Her name is Jamila. I worked with her with lepers. Mm-hmm. I mean, these people, for example, I would go into the slums of Calcutta with a quarter of a bag of rice. And the first thing I would give it to a mother. This is a mother who is pencil thin. Mm-hmm. She has lots of kids. In India, the father eats first and the children eat, and the mother eats anything that is left. And she was so grateful. She took half of the rice and she gave it to her neighbors.
So bring it home to us here in Nebraska, Father. How do we exercise what you were given?
We're materialistic. Power and money is so much of our lives here. It is just very, very sad that this deprives us of making contacts with many people.
Yeah, so reel us in a little bit. What could we be doing each day that would somehow
take a look and see what's happening across the street with your neighbor's life? Get to know people. Get out of the house. Get out of the office. Get on the street. Talk to people. You find out what's going on in their lives, and you might be able to help.
Yeah, and I think that exists, Father.
Get out of the house.
People are very good-hearted, especially in Nebraska. But again, we haven't been where you've been,
Good-hearted
Father.
is one thing, but just simply making yourself available to be with these people.
Right.
You just simply stay in the house and watch television.
Which you have obviously done. What's next for you at 80 years of age, Father?
Some of this, what we're doing right now.
Okay.
Sharing a good story with people, encouraging them to cross bridges, not to be afraid of new ventures in their lives, and just have fun.
Yeah, fear is a big thing, isn't it, Father?
That's it.
How do we get over fear?
That's a good question.
Could be another program, couldn't it?
It's something that you do step by step by step by step. You counter fear. You go ahead and do it, and even though you're afraid, that turns out okay. The next time it's easier.
Yeah. So we all want to leave legacies in this life, right? You have seen a lot, experienced a lot, touched a lot of folks. What is it going to be that we remember most about you?
That Father Ken was a happy man, that he enjoyed life, that he enjoyed every minute of life. He was happy, not afraid, and just had fun.
Yeah, so if you were to go back and rewind, which you obviously recently did in writing the book, is there any one experience, Father, that you can think of that really trumps them all?
Oh my, that's not easy. I remember I was in Calcutta at the time, and Mother Teresa was invited to give a talk in a church, and there were the major, big wheels of the major religious communities were present: Christian, Muslim, Hindus, Buddhists. And Mother walked up on the stage, and I said, what in the world is that woman going to say? I mean, these people in the audience, all these bishops and pastors, they all figured they had the correct liturgy, the best theology. What is she going to say? Little Mother Teresa, they had to help her up the steps. They had to lower the mic for her because she was so little. And Mother Teresa said, God only sees the love in our hearts. And I could tell that she was going to continue to say something more, but she realized that she nailed it. God only sees the love in our hearts. That changed my life.
Wow. Father, we saw several photographs from excerpts from your book. If you had it to do again, and you were sitting down initially to write this book, is there a story that you didn't share that you wish you would have in the book? Now that it's all said and done, right?
So many of them working with lepers. I should have shared more stories of the joy of working with lepers, more stories about Jamila and other people with whom I worked. In other countries, working with the poorest of the poor, helping the people to understand that even though they're poor and they are disadvantaged, they're happy, and that by connecting with them, you can have a wonderful, wonderful life. I worked with the poorest of the poor for 21 years, and I loved it. I've had a great life. What more can I say?
Okay, well, we want to put up some information, Father, so that if people are looking for this book or even excerpts from the book, they'll know where to find them. So let's put that information up now for folks. Again,
yeah, read the book. It's interesting.
This interview has been interesting. It's called...
It's a great book.
If you do say so yourself, right?
Yeah. Okay. It's a good book.
The book is called Crossing Bridges.
Good title.
A priest's uplifting story. Uplifting life among the poorest, among the downtrodden, forgive me. Okay, so, and you can find excerpts at leoadambiga.com. The cover story, which will be out here very, very soon, you can find in New Horizons newspaper. Father, thank you so much for being here, for sharing your stories with us. We appreciate you very, very much. Thank you. Best wishes.
Bye-bye.
And thank you all for watching. We'll see you next week.
Consider This is an issues and information program produced by UNO Television. More information can be found at unotv.unomaha.edu. If you'd like to share your comments about this show, call UNO TV at 402-554-2516 during regular business hours, or email us at considerthis@tvmail.unomaha.edu.